Welcome to 7 Lessons from the book titled, Dealing with Difficult People by Harvard Business Emotional Intelligence series. If you've ever found yourself frustrated by a coworker's passive-aggressive comments, stressed out by a colleague's constant urgency, or demoralized by a difficult boss, this book is for you. Compiled from articles by experts like Mark Gerzon, Holly Weeks, Tony Schwartz, Amy Gallo, and others, this collection offers practical, emotionally intelligent strategies for navigating challenging workplace relationships. Whether it's a mean colleague, a stressed-out teammate, or a micromanaging boss, this book equips you with tools to manage conflict, communicate effectively, and maintain your professionalism. We'll dive deep into the key insights, real-world examples, and actionable advice from this essential guide. Let's get started. 7 Lessons from the book titled, Dealing with Difficult People by Harvard Business Review. The book offers valuable insights into navigating challenging interpersonal dynamics in both personal and professional contexts. Here are some key lessons drawn from the series. 1. Understand the root causes of behavior. Difficult behavior often stems from deeper issues such as fear, frustration, or stress. Recognizing these underlying factors can help you respond with empathy rather than frustration. The emotional roots of conflict. Mark Gerzon, in his article To Resolve a Conflict, First Decide, Is It Hot or Cold?, sets the stage by emphasizing that difficult behavior often stems from emotional undercurrents. He introduces the concept of conflict temperature, hot, cold, or warm, to explain how emotions shape workplace disputes. Hot conflicts, marked by shouting or aggression, arise when emotions like anger or frustration boil over. Cold conflicts, characterized by silence or passive-aggressive muttering, stem from suppressed feelings, often rooted in fear of confrontation or unresolved resentment. Gerzon's insight is that these behaviors aren't random. They're driven by emotional states that need to be addressed before resolution is possible. For example, Gerzon recalls working with U.S. House members in a retreat designed to bridge divides. He asked, "How does the way the House deals with its differences affect you and your family personally?" This question tapped into the personal toll of constant conflict, revealing that their aggressive or withdrawn behaviors were often fueled by stress, fear of losing face, or pressure to perform. By understanding these emotional roots, Gerzon could guide them toward warmer, more productive dialogue. This teaches us that recognizing the emotional triggers, whether it's stress, insecurity, or external pressures, helps us respond with empathy rather than judgment, setting the stage for constructive outcomes. Stress and insecurity as behavioral drivers. Holly Weeks, in Taking the Stress Out of Stressful Conversations, digs deeper into how stress and emotional entanglement drive difficult behavior. She argues that stressful conversations, whether delivering bad news, facing unexpected tension, or enduring personal attacks, amplify emotions like anxiety, anger, or fear. These emotions often cause people to act in ways that seem irrational or hostile. For instance, Weeks describes Karen, a senior manager who lashed out at her colleague Nick after a botched client presentation. Karen's accusations and threats weren't just about the meeting. They stemmed from her fear of failure and the pressure to maintain her reputation. Her aggression was a defense mechanism, not a personal attack on Nick. Weeks' real-world example of Elizabeth and Raphael further illustrates this. Raphael snapped at Elizabeth's neutral question, "Is that it then?" during a project meeting, perceiving it as controlling. His reaction wasn't about Elizabeth's words, but likely tied to past experiences, perhaps a childhood authority figure or a previous workplace slight, that made him sensitive to perceived slights. Weeks suggests that such behaviors often stem from unacknowledged emotional baggage, like insecurity or fear of losing status. By understanding these roots, you can avoid taking the behavior personally and instead use techniques like restating intentions to defuse the tension, as Elizabeth could have done by saying, "I can see how you took my comment." Let's go over the list again. The need to feel valued. Tony Schwartz, in The Secret to Dealing with Difficult People, It's About You, highlights a universal driver of difficult behavior, the need to feel valued. When people feel devalued, they may act out through criticism, credit stealing, or defensiveness. Schwartz shares his own story of being fired by a difficult boss, which felt devastating but revealed the boss's own insecurities about control and competence. This experience pushed Schwartz to found his own company, showing how understanding the root cause, his boss's fear of being outshone, helped him reframe the situation. Schwartz's lens of realistic optimism encourages us to ask, what's the story I'm telling myself about this person's behavior? For example, if a colleague constantly criticizes your work, they might be compensating for their own feelings of inadequacy. His reverse lens, viewing the world through their perspective, reveals that difficult behaviors often stem from insecurity or external pressures. In a workplace example, a manager who takes credit for your ideas might be driven by fear of being seen as irrelevant. By empathizing with their need to feel valued, you can respond with strategies that affirm their worth, like publicly acknowledging their contributions, which may reduce their defensive behavior. Fear of conflict and self-centeredness in passive aggression. Amy Gallo's articles on mean and passive-aggressive colleagues uncover specific triggers for these behaviors. In How to Deal with a Passive-Aggressive Colleague, she explains that passive aggression often arises from fear of direct conflict or a self-centered assumption that others should intuit their needs. Gallo's case study of Sarah, a high school guidance counselor, illustrates this. Sarah agreed to plans and meetings, but sabotaged them by claiming forgetfulness, saying, "That's not how I remember it." Her behavior stemmed from discomfort with confrontation, leading her to express frustration indirectly. By understanding this, her colleague Mitch implemented public accountability through meeting notes, which curbed her sabotage without escalating the conflict. Similarly, in How to Deal with a Mean Colleague, Gallo suggests that mean behavior, like bullying or rudeness, often comes from stress or insecurity. In her case study, Ellen faced a colleague who undermined her in meetings, likely driven by jealousy over her promotion. By recognizing this root cause, Ellen could address the behavior calmly, calling it out without retaliating. Gallo's insight is that understanding these motivations, fear, insecurity, or unmet needs, allows you to focus on the underlying issue, like Sarah's need for control or Ellen's colleague's need for validation, rather than getting caught in emotional reactions. External pressures and organizational culture. Finally, Manfred F. R. Ketz de Vries in Do You Hate Your Boss? And Liz Kislik in How to Manage Someone Who Thinks Everything is Urgent highlight how external pressures and workplace culture fuel difficult behavior. Ketz de Vries describes Stacy, who struggled with her boss Peter's aloofness and micromanaging. Peter's behavior wasn't personal. It was driven by pressure to deliver results and his own discomfort with inherited staff. By practicing empathy, as colleague George did with his overwhelmed boss Abby, Stacy could have opened a dialogue about Peter's pressures, potentially improving their relationship. Kislik's example of a team leader who rushed decisions reveals how a culture of urgency can amplify problematic behavior. His need to control everything stemmed from feeling alone with immense responsibility. By addressing this through mindfulness and delegation, Kislik helped him share the load, reducing his frantic behavior. These examples show that difficult behavior often reflects broader systemic pressures, not just personal flaws. Understanding the root causes of difficult behavior, emotional triggers, insecurity, fear of conflict, or external pressures, transforms how we navigate workplace challenges. Whether it's Gerzon's hot and cold conflicts, Week's stressful conversations, Schwartz's focus on feeling valued, Gallo's insights into passive aggression, or Ketz de Vries and Kislik's emphasis on systemic pressures, dealing with difficult people teaches us to look beyond the surface. By empathizing with these root causes, as seen in real-world examples like Sarah's sabotage or Peter's micromanaging, we can respond with clarity, compassion, and strategy. This approach not only diffuses tension but also fosters stronger, more productive relationships. 2. Practice active listening. One of the most effective ways to deal with difficult people is to truly listen. By giving them your full attention, you can help defuse tensions and create a more productive dialogue. Active listening in conflict resolution. Mark Gerzon, in To Resolve a Conflict, First Decide, Is It Hot or Cold? Underscores active listening as a cornerstone of managing workplace conflicts. Gerzon explains that conflicts are either hot, marked by emotional outbursts, or cold, characterized by withdrawal and suppressed feelings. To move toward a productive, warm conflict, leaders must listen actively to understand the emotional undercurrents driving the behavior. This means hearing not just words but the feelings and needs behind them, without interrupting or judging. Gerzon shares a powerful example from his work with U.S. House members during a retreat. To cool a hot conflict, he asked each participant to answer, "How does the way the House deals with its differences affect you and your family personally?" By giving each person 3 uninterrupted minutes to speak, Gerzon ensured they felt heard, fostering trust. One congressman, initially aggressive, softened as he shared the personal toll of political gridlock. Active listening allowed Gerzon to identify shared pain points, paving the way for collaboration. This teaches us that listening without rushing to respond can de-escalate even the most heated disputes, creating space for mutual understanding. Listening to defuse stressful conversations. Holly Weeks, in taking the stress out of stressful conversations, emphasizes active listening as a tool to navigate emotionally charged exchanges. Weeks describes 3 types of stressful conversations: delivering bad news, unexpected conflicts, and personal attacks, where listening is often the first casualty. When emotions like anger or anxiety take over, people stop hearing each other, escalating the tension. Active listening, Weeks argues, involves staying present, acknowledging the other person's perspective, and responding selectively to key points. A vivid example is the case of Elizabeth and Raphael, team leaders caught in an unexpected conflict. Raphael snapped at Elizabeth's neutral question, "Is that it then?" perceiving it as controlling. Elizabeth, rattled, initially apologized, missing the chance to listen to Raphael's underlying frustration. Weeks suggests that active listening could have changed the outcome. If Elizabeth had said, "Raphael, I hear you're upset. Can you share what's going on?" and listened without defending herself, she might have uncovered Raphael's fear of being sidelined. This would have shifted the conversation from confrontation to collaboration. Weeks' advice, listen to everything, but respond selectively, highlights how active listening helps you focus on the core issue, not the emotional noise, preventing misunderstandings from spiraling. Listening through empathy to reframe perspectives. Tony Schwartz, in The Secret to Dealing with Difficult People, It's About You, connects active listening to empathy, a key to handling difficult colleagues. Schwartz's reverse lens encourages you to view the world through the other person's perspective, asking, "What is this person feeling, and how does that make sense?" This requires listening not just to words, but to the emotions and insecurities driving their behavior. By truly hearing their side, you can respond in ways that validate their needs, reducing defensiveness. Schwartz illustrates this with his own experience of being fired by a difficult boss. Initially, he felt devalued, but by reflecting on his boss's perspective, he realized the boss's harshness stemmed from insecurity about maintaining control. If Schwartz had actively listened during their interactions, perhaps by asking, "What's making this situation challenging for you?" he might have built a bridge. In another workplace example, Schwartz describes a colleague who constantly criticized others. By listening to understand their insecurity, a teammate responded with empathy, saying, "I hear you're concerned about the project's quality. Let's work together on it." This disarmed the critic, fostering cooperation. Active listening, Schwartz shows, is the gateway to empathy, turning triggers into opportunities for connection. Listening to address passive-aggressive behavior. Amy Gallo, in How to Deal with a Passive-Aggressive Colleague, highlights active listening as a strategy to uncover the underlying issues behind snarky comments or subtle sabotage. Passive-aggressive behavior often stems from fear of conflict, and listening actively can help you address the real concern without getting caught in the toxic delivery. Gallo advises focusing on the content of their message, not the tone, and reflecting back what you hear to move the conversation forward. Gallo's case study of Mitch and Sarah brings this to life. Sarah, a coworker, agreed to plans and meetings but later claimed forgetfulness, undermining Mitch's efforts. Instead of reacting to her evasiveness, Mitch could have used active listening by saying, "Sarah, I heard you say you didn't think the plan was finalized. Can you share your concerns about it?" This would have invited Sarah to express her discomfort with the plan, perhaps revealing her fear of being blamed for failures. By listening to her perspective, Mitch could have addressed the root issue, preventing further sabotage. Gallo's insight is that active listening validates the other person's feelings, reducing their need to resort to passive-aggressive tactics. Listening to understand a difficult boss. Manfred F. R. Ketz de Vries, in Do You Hate Your Boss?, emphasizes active listening as a way to manage up with a challenging boss. He suggests practicing empathy by listening to understand the pressures your boss faces, which often drive behaviors like micromanaging or aloofness. This requires asking open-ended questions and truly hearing their responses, even when you're frustrated. Ketz de Vries shares the example of George, a sales manager struggling with his boss Abby's lack of support. During a business trip, George used active listening over dinner, asking, "How are the new business projects in China coming along?" By giving Abby space to share her stresses, George learned she was overwhelmed by her own manager's demands. This insight allowed him to adjust his approach, reducing tension. Active listening helped George see Abby's behavior as a reaction to pressure, not a personal slight, paving the way for a better working relationship. Ketz de Vries shows that listening to your boss's perspective can transform a strained dynamic into a productive partnership. Active listening is a game changer in dealing with difficult people, as dealing with difficult people vividly illustrates. From Gerzon's conflict resolution retreats to Weeks' stressful conversation strategies, Schwartz's empathetic lenses, Gallo's handling of passive aggression, and Ketz de Vries' approach to difficult bosses, the book shows that listening, truly hearing the emotions, needs, and pressures behind the behavior, unlocks solutions. Real-world examples, like George's dinner with Abby or Mitch's potential response to Sarah, demonstrate how active listening builds trust, defuses tension, and fosters collaboration. The next time you face a difficult colleague or boss, pause, listen, and ask, "What's really going on here?" That simple act can change everything. 3. Set clear boundaries. Establishing and communicating clear boundaries is essential when dealing with difficult individuals. This helps to protect your own well-being and ensures that interactions remain respectful. Boundaries in confronting mean behavior. Amy Gallo, in How to Deal with a Mean Colleague, champions setting boundaries as the first line of defense against rude or bullying behavior. Gallo explains that mean colleagues, whether they're making snide comments or undermining you in meetings, thrive when their behavior goes unchecked. Setting a clear boundary means addressing the issue directly, calmly, and early to prevent escalation. This isn't about confrontation, but about signaling that certain behaviors won't be tolerated. Gallo's case study of Jacqueline illustrates this perfectly. During a board meeting, a male colleague told a sexist joke, making Jacqueline feel sidelined. Instead of ignoring it, she waited for a private moment and said, "That kind of humor is frivolous to you, but it makes me feel pushed aside. I'd appreciate it if you didn't make those jokes." Her clear, specific boundary, naming the behavior and its impact, set a standard without escalating into a fight. The colleague, taken aback, nodded and avoided similar jokes in the future. Gallo's lesson is that boundaries work best when they're timely and focused on the behavior, not the person. By addressing the issue head-on, Jacqueline protected her dignity and shifted the dynamic, showing that boundaries can be both firm and respectful. Boundaries in stressful conversations. Holly Weeks, in Taking the Stress Out of Stressful Conversations, highlights how boundaries help navigate emotionally charged exchanges, like personal attacks or unexpected conflicts. Weeks argues that without boundaries, these conversations can spiral into defensiveness or aggression. A boundary in this context means naming unacceptable tactics, like insults or threats, and redirecting the discussion to the issue at hand, all while staying composed. Weeks shares the example of Karen and Nick, colleagues who clashed after a failed client presentation. Karen, furious, launched into personal attacks, accusing Nick of incompetence and threatening his role. Nick, overwhelmed, initially tried to reason with her, but this only fueled her tirade. Weeks suggests that Nick could have set a boundary by saying, "Karen, I hear you're upset, but attacking me personally isn't helping. Let's focus on what went wrong and how to fix it." This would have named her aggressive tactic, making it harder for her to continue without losing face, while keeping the conversation productive. Weeks emphasizes that boundaries in stressful moments require preparation. Know your triggers and rehearse phrases to stay calm. By setting this line, you protect your emotional space and guide the conversation back to constructive territory. Boundaries with passive-aggressive colleagues. Amy Gallo returns in How to Deal with a Passive-Aggressive Colleague, where she underscores boundaries as a way to curb subtle but toxic behaviors like snarky remarks or feigned ignorance. Passive-aggressive colleagues often test limits, hoping you'll absorb their frustration. Gallo advises setting boundaries by addressing the behavior's impact and suggesting healthier communication norms, ideally with team support to reinforce the standard. Gallo's case study of Mitch and Sarah brings this to life. Sarah, a coworker, agreed to project plans and meetings, but later sabotaged them by claiming forgetfulness, saying, "That's not how I remember it." This undermined Mitch's leadership. Instead of letting it slide, Mitch could have set a boundary by saying, "Sarah, when you say you don't recall our agreement, it delays our progress. Let's review the plan now to ensure we're aligned." This boundary calls out the behavior's impact without accusing her, encouraging accountability. Mitch took it further by implementing meeting notes shared publicly, a structural boundary that made Sarah's evasiveness harder to sustain. Gallo's insight is that boundaries with passive-aggressive colleagues must be clear and consistent, signaling that indirect tactics won't derail your work. Boundaries with urgency-driven colleagues. Liz Kislik, in How to Manage Someone Who Thinks Everything is Urgent, explores boundaries as a way to manage colleagues who rush decisions, often causing mistakes. Kislik notes that urgency-driven behavior can disrupt teams, especially when it's praised in fast-paced cultures. Setting boundaries means redirecting their energy toward thoughtful collaboration, often by enforcing processes that prioritize impact over speed. Kislik shares the example of an assistant vice president who acted unilaterally, alienating teammates by rushing decisions without input. His manager set a boundary by requiring impact statements before major actions, asking him to outline how his decisions affected others. When he pushed back, the manager calmly reiterated, "We value your initiative, but decisions need team input to succeed. Please include an impact statement next time." This boundary slowed his rush, forcing him to consider consequences. Over time, the team praised collaborative efforts, reinforcing the new norm. Kislik's approach shows that boundaries with urgency-driven colleagues often involve structural changes, like mandatory checkpoints, to balance their energy with team goals. Boundaries with a difficult boss. Manfred F. R. Ketz de Vries, in Do You Hate Your Boss?, emphasizes boundaries when managing up with a challenging boss. Behaviors like micromanaging or taking credit can erode your confidence, but boundaries help you reclaim your space. This might mean addressing the behavior in a safe setting or limiting how much their actions affect your work. Ketz de Vries describes Stacy, who struggled with her boss Peter's aloofness and tendency to micromanage. Peter often rewrote Stacy's reports without explanation, leaving her frustrated. Stacy set a boundary during a one-on-one, saying, "Peter, I notice you revise my reports significantly. I'd like to understand your expectations up front to reduce rework. Can we discuss this?" This boundary respectfully signaled that constant revisions weren't sustainable, inviting collaboration. Peter, surprised, agreed to clarify his expectations earlier, improving their dynamic. Ketz de Vries shows that boundaries with a boss require tact and timing. Choose a neutral moment and frame the boundary as a mutual benefit. This empowers you to protect your work while fostering a better relationship. Setting clear boundaries is a powerful tool for dealing with difficult people, as dealing with difficult people brilliantly demonstrates. From Gallo's strategies for mean and passive-aggressive colleagues to Week's tactics for stressful conversations, Kislik's approach to urgency, and Ketz de Vries' advice for managing up, the book shows that boundaries protect your well-being and set the tone for respectful interactions. Real-world examples, like Jacqueline's response to a sexist joke or Stacy's conversation with her boss, illustrate how clear, calm boundaries shift dynamics without escalating conflict. The next time you face a difficult colleague or boss, draw your line with confidence. It's not just about saying no, but about saying yes to a healthier workplace. 4. Stay calm and composed. Maintaining your composure in the face of difficult behavior is crucial. Practicing self-regulation can prevent escalations and sets a positive tone for the conversation. Composure in stressful conversations. Holly Weeks, in Taking the Stress Out of Stressful Conversations, underscores that staying calm is essential for navigating emotionally charged exchanges. Whether it's delivering bad news, facing unexpected conflict, or enduring personal attacks, stress can hijack our reactions, leading to defensiveness or escalation. Weak advocates preparing for these moments by knowing your emotional triggers and rehearsing neutral responses to maintain composure. Weeks illustrates this with the case of Karen and Nick, colleagues who clashed after a failed client presentation. Karen's fury erupted into personal attacks, accusing Nick of incompetence. Nick, caught off guard, initially tried to argue, which only fueled her anger. Weeks suggests that Nick could have stayed composed by taking a breath and saying, "Karen, I see you're upset. Let's focus on what happened and how we can fix it." This calm response, rooted in preparation, would have neutralized Karen's aggression without matching her intensity. Weeks' real-world example shows that composure, achieved through self-awareness and practiced phrasing, keeps you grounded, allowing you to steer the conversation towards solutions rather than chaos. Composure when facing mean colleagues. Amy Gallo, in How to Deal with a Mean Colleague, emphasizes that staying calm is critical when confronting rude or bullying behavior. Mean colleagues often provoke emotional reactions to gain the upper hand, but composure signals strength and prevents escalation. Gallo advises addressing the behavior directly while maintaining a steady tone and focusing on the issue, not the person. Gallo's case study of Jacqueline brings this to life. During a board meeting, a colleague told a sexist joke, making Jacqueline feel marginalized. Instead of reacting impulsively, Jacqueline stayed composed, waiting for a private moment to address it. She said calmly, "That kind of humor feels dismissive to me. I'd appreciate it if you avoided those jokes." Her steady delivery, prepared through mental rehearsal, made her boundary clear without inviting a defensive retort. The colleague, disarmed by her composure, agreed to stop. Gallo's lesson is that staying calm, even when you feel provoked, empowers you to set boundaries effectively, shifting the dynamic without losing your professionalism. Composure through reframing perspectives. Tony Schwartz, in The Secret to Dealing with Difficult People, It's About You, connects composure to reframing your perspective. When a colleague or boss devalues you, it's easy to react with anger or self-doubt. But Schwartz argues that staying calm comes from choosing how you interpret their behavior. His realistic optimism lens asks, "What are the facts, and what's the story I'm telling myself?" This mental pause helps you stay composed by separating emotions from reality. Schwartz shares a personal example of being fired by a difficult boss, a moment that initially shook him. Instead of lashing out, he reflected calmly, asking, "What's driving my boss's behavior?" Realizing his boss's harshness stemmed from insecurity, Schwartz stayed composed, focusing on his own growth. This led him to found a successful company. In another workplace scenario, a colleague faced constant criticism from a teammate. By calmly applying the reverse lens to understand the critic's insecurity, they responded with steady empathy, saying, "I hear your concerns. Let's collaborate on this." This composure de-escalated tension and built trust. Schwartz shows that staying calm through reframing keeps you in control, turning adversity into opportunity. Composure with passive-aggressive behavior. Amy Gallo returns in How to Deal with a Passive-Aggressive Colleague, where she highlights composure as key to handling snarky comments or subtle sabotage. Passive-aggressive behavior thrives on provoking emotional reactions, but staying calm allows you to focus on the underlying issue, not the toxic delivery. Gallo advises responding with steady, constructive language to avoid playing into their game. Gallo's case study of Mitch and Sarah illustrates this. Sarah undermined Mitch by agreeing to plans and meetings, but later claiming forgetfulness, saying, "That's not how I remember it." Mitch, frustrated, could have snapped, but Gallo suggests a composed response. "Sarah, I notice we're not aligned on the plan. Let's review it now to move forward." By staying calm, Mitch addressed the behavior's impact without accusing her, maintaining control. He reinforced this by calmly implementing public meeting notes, a structural solution that curbed Sarah's tactics. Gallo's insight is that composure, maintained through deliberate, neutral phrasing, neutralizes passive aggression, keeping you focused on the work and protecting your credibility. Composure with a difficult boss. Manfred F. R. Ketz de Vries, in Do You Hate Your Boss? Emphasizes staying calm when managing up with a challenging boss. Behaviors like micromanaging or aloofness can trigger frustration, but composure allows you to address the issue tactfully, preserving the relationship. Ketz de Vries suggests choosing a safe setting and using steady, respectful language to communicate your needs. Ketz de Vries shares the example of Stacy, who struggled with her boss Peter's tendency to rewrite her reports without explanation. Instead of confronting him in anger, Stacy stayed composed during a one-on-one, saying, "Peter, I've noticed my reports are heavily revised. Can we discuss your expectations to streamline the process?" Her calm, solution-focused approach invited collaboration rather than defensiveness. Peter, surprised, agreed to clarify his expectations up front, improving their dynamic. Ketz de Vries shows that composure, paired with strategic timing, empowers you to address a boss's difficult behavior while maintaining professionalism and influence. Staying calm and composed is a superpower in dealing with difficult people, as dealing with difficult people vividly illustrates. From Week's strategies for stressful conversations to Gallo's tactics for mean and passive-aggressive colleagues, Schwartz's reframing approach, and Ketz de Vries' advice for managing up, the book shows that composure keeps you in control, turning tension into opportunity. Real-world examples, like Jacqueline's steady boundary setting or Stacy's tactful conversation with her boss, demonstrate how staying calm preserves your professionalism and shifts dynamics. The next time you face a difficult colleague or boss, take a breath, stay steady, and respond with clarity. It's the key to thriving in any workplace. 5. Use I statements. When addressing issues, use I statements to express your feelings without sounding accusatory. For example, saying, "I feel overwhelmed when deadlines are missed," can foster a more constructive discussion. Holly Weeks, in taking the stress out of stressful conversations, emphasizes I statements as a way to navigate emotionally charged exchanges without escalating tension. In situations like delivering bad news or facing personal attacks, accusatory language, like "you messed this up," can shut down dialogue. I statements, by contrast, focus on your feelings and invite understanding, keeping the conversation productive. Weeks illustrates this with the case of Karen and Nick, colleagues who clashed after a failed client presentation. Karen's attacks, like "you're incompetent," overwhelmed Nick, who struggled to respond. Weeks suggests Nick could have used an I statement, saying, "I feel frustrated when we don't align on presentations, and I'd like to discuss how we can improve." This approach, rooted in expressing his own experience, would have signaled his concern without blaming Karen, encouraging her to engage rather than double down. Weeks' example shows that I statements, prepared in advance, help you stay calm and keep the focus on solving the problem, even when emotions run high. I statements with mean colleagues. Amy Gallo, in How to Deal with a Mean Colleague, highlights I statements as a key strategy for addressing rude or bullying behavior without sparking defensiveness. Mean colleagues often provoke reactions, but I statements allow you to set boundaries by focusing on the impact of their actions, not their character. This makes it harder for them to dismiss your concerns. Gallo's case study of Jacqueline brings this to life. During a board meeting, a colleague told a sexist joke, making Jacqueline feel sidelined. Instead of saying, "Your joke was offensive," which might have prompted a defensive retort, Jacqueline waited and said, "I feel pushed aside when humor like that is used in meetings. I'd appreciate it if we kept things professional." By using an I statement, Jacqueline expressed her discomfort clearly, focusing on her feelings rather than accusing her colleague. The colleague, caught off guard by her calm approach, agreed to stop. Gallo's lesson is that I statements deliver your message with clarity and respect, making it easier to address mean behavior while maintaining a constructive tone. I statements to reframe perspectives. Tony Schwartz, in The Secret to Dealing with Difficult People, It's About You, connects I statements to the practice of reframing your perspective. When a colleague's behavior feels devaluing, it's tempting to lash out with you statements, like, "You're undermining me." Schwartz's reverse lens encourages empathy, and I statements help you express your needs while acknowledging the other person's perspective, fostering mutual understanding. Schwartz shares a workplace example of a teammate facing constant criticism from a colleague. Instead of saying, "You're always negative," which could escalate tension, the teammate used an I statement. "I feel discouraged when my work is frequently critiqued, and I'd like us to discuss how we can collaborate better." This expressed their feelings while opening a door for dialogue, prompting the critic to share their own pressures, leading to a more cooperative dynamic. Schwartz's own story of being fired by a difficult boss also applies. He later wished he'd said, "I feel confused by your feedback and want to understand your expectations." Such an I statement could have clarified the situation calmly. Schwartz shows that I statements ground you in your experience, helping you stay composed and build bridges. I statements with passive-aggressive colleagues. Amy Gallo returns on how to deal with a passive-aggressive colleague, where she advocates I statements to address snarky or sabotaging behavior. Passive-aggressive colleagues thrive on ambiguity, but I statements cut through by clearly stating the impact of their actions, encouraging accountability without confrontation. Gallo's case study of Mitch and Sarah illustrates this. Sarah undermined Mitch by agreeing to plans and meetings, but later claiming forgetfulness, saying, "That's not how I remember it." Instead of saying, "You're sabotaging me," Mitch could have used an I statement. "I feel confused when our agreed plans aren't followed, and I'd like us to clarify them now." This focuses on Mitch's experience, making it harder for Sarah to dodge responsibility. Mitch reinforced this by calmly introducing public meeting notes, but his initial I statement could have set the tone for accountability. Gallo's insight is that I statements, delivered with a steady tone, redirect passive-aggressive behavior toward constructive discussion, protecting your work without escalating drama. I statements with a difficult boss. Manfred F. R. Ketz de Vries, in Do You Hate Your Boss?, emphasizes I statements as a tactful way to manage up with a challenging boss. Behaviors like micromanaging can feel personal, but I statements allow you to address the issue respectfully, focusing on your needs rather than their flaws, which preserves the relationship. Ketz de Vries shares the example of Stacy, who struggled with her boss Peter's habit of rewriting her reports without explanation. Instead of saying, "You're micromanaging me," Stacy used an I statement during a one-on-one. "I feel uncertain when my reports are heavily revised, and I'd like to understand your expectations to improve." This expressed her frustration while inviting collaboration, prompting Peter to clarify his preferences, which streamlined their process. Stacy's I statement, delivered in a neutral setting, showed respect while addressing the issue. Ketz de Vries teaches that I statements with a boss require careful phrasing and timing, but they empower you to advocate for yourself while fostering a better dynamic. Using I statements is a game changer in dealing with difficult people, as dealing with difficult people powerfully demonstrates. From weak strategies for stressful conversations to Gallo's tactics for mean and passive-aggressive colleagues, Schwartz's reframing approach, and Ketz de Vries' advice for managing up, the book shows that I statements express your feelings without accusation, fostering constructive dialogue. Real-world examples, like Jacqueline's response to a sexist joke or Stacy's conversation with her boss, illustrate how I statements keep conversations respectful and solution-focused. The next time you face a difficult colleague or boss, use an I statement to share your perspective. It's a small shift that can make a big difference. 6. Focus on solutions, not problems. Shift the conversation from dwelling on the difficulties to brainstorming solutions. This proactive approach encourages collaboration and can help resolve conflicts more efficiently. Solutions in stressful conversations. Holly Weeks, in Taking the Stress Out of Stressful Conversations, emphasizes that focusing on solutions is key to navigating emotionally charged exchanges. Whether delivering bad news or facing hostility, dwelling on the problem, like who's to blame, escalates tension. Weeks advocates using clear, neutral language to propose next steps, keeping the conversation forward-looking. Weeks illustrates this with the case of Karen and Nick, colleagues who clashed after a failed client presentation. Karen's personal attacks, like "you're incompetent," trapped them in blame. Nick struggled to respond, but Weeks suggests he could have shifted to solutions, saying, "I see we're both upset about the presentation. Let's figure out what went wrong and plan for the next one." This solution-focused approach, prepared through rehearsal, would have redirected Karen's anger toward collaboration, bypassing the blame game. Weeks' example shows that by proposing actionable steps, you can transform a stressful conversation into a problem-solving session, maintaining professionalism and momentum. Solutions with mean colleagues. Amy Gallo, in How to Deal with a Mean Colleague, highlights that focusing on solutions helps address rude or bullying behavior without getting stuck in negativity. Mean colleagues thrive on provocation, but a solution-oriented response sets boundaries while moving the interaction toward a positive outcome. Gallo's case study of Jacqueline demonstrates this. During a board meeting, a colleague's sexist joke made Jacqueline feel sidelined. Instead of fixating on the offense, Jacqueline addressed it with a solution-focused mindset, saying, "I feel pushed aside when humor like that is used. Can we keep meetings professional going forward?" By proposing a clear path, professional conduct, she shifted the focus from the problem, the joke, to a solution, better meetings. The colleague, disarmed by her constructive approach, agreed to change. Gallo's lesson is that solution-oriented responses, rooted in calm boundary setting, not only address mean behavior, but also create a framework for improved interactions, fostering a healthier dynamic. Solutions through reframing perspectives. Tony Schwartz, in The Secret to Dealing with Difficult People, It's About You, connects focusing on solutions to reframing your perspective. When a colleague's behavior feels devaluing, it's tempting to obsess over their actions. But Schwartz's long lens asks, how can I grow from this? This solution-oriented mindset shifts your focus to actionable growth, turning challenges into opportunities. Schwartz shares his own story of being fired by a difficult boss, a moment that initially felt crushing. Instead of dwelling on the injustice, he reframed it, asking, "What can I do next?" This led him to found a successful company, a solution born from adversity. In another example, a teammate faced a colleague who constantly criticized their work. Rather than focusing on the criticism, they proposed a solution, saying, "I hear your concerns. Let's set up a weekly check-in to align on this project." This forward-looking approach turned tension into collaboration, as the critic appreciated the proactive step. Schwartz shows that focusing on solutions, through reframing, empowers you to take control, finding growth and progress even in tough situations. Solutions with passive-aggressive colleagues. Amy Gallo returns in How to Deal with a Passive-Aggressive Colleague, where she advocates focusing on solutions to counter snarky or sabotaging behavior. Passive-aggressive colleagues often dodge accountability, but a solution-oriented response addresses the issue's impact and proposes clear next steps, cutting through their ambiguity. Gallo's case study of Mitch and Sarah brings this to life. Sarah undermined Mitch by agreeing to project plans, but later claiming forgetfulness, saying, "That's not how I remember it." Instead of focusing on her evasiveness, Mitch could have said, "I notice we're not aligned on the plan. Let's review it now and document our agreement." This solution-focused response shifts the conversation to action, reviewing and documenting, making it harder for Sarah to derail progress. Mitch reinforced this by implementing public meeting notes, a structural solution that ensured accountability. Gallo's insight is that focusing on solutions, like clear processes or follow-ups, neutralizes passive aggression, keeping the focus on work and preventing further disruption. Solutions with urgency-driven colleagues. Liz Kislick, in How to Manage Someone Who Thinks Everything is Urgent, emphasizes focusing on solutions to manage colleagues who rush decisions, often causing errors. Urgency-driven behavior can disrupt teams, but proposing collaborative processes redirects their energy toward thoughtful outcomes. Kislick shares the example of an assistant vice president who made hasty decisions without team input, alienating colleagues. His manager shifted the focus to solutions, saying, "Your initiative is great, but we need team alignment. Let's require impact statements for major decisions." This solution, impact statements, forced the VP to consider consequences, slowing his rush. When he resisted, the manager calmly reiterated the process, and over time, the team praised collaborative decisions, reinforcing the solution. Kislick's approach shows that solution-oriented strategies, like structured processes, channel urgency into productive outcomes, balancing individual drive with team success. Focusing on solutions, not problems, is a game-changer in dealing with difficult people, as dealing with difficult people brilliantly illustrates. From weak strategies for stressful conversations to Gallo's tactics for mean and passive-aggressive colleagues, Schwartz's reframing approach, and Kislick's solutions for urgency, the book shows that a forward-looking mindset drives progress. Real-world examples, like Jacqueline's professional boundary or Mitch's meeting notes, demonstrate how solution-oriented responses turn challenges into opportunities. The next time you face a difficult colleague or situation, ask, "What's the next step?" It's the key to transforming tension into collaboration. 7. Know when to walk away. Sometimes, the best course of action is to disengage from a toxic interaction. Recognizing when to step back can protect your mental health and allow you to revisit the situation later with a clearer perspective. These lessons provide practical tools for effectively managing relationships with difficult individuals, enhancing both personal and professional interactions. Amy Gallo, in How to Deal with a Mean Colleague, underscores that sometimes the best response to toxic behavior is to disengage. While addressing mean or bullying colleagues is important, Gallo warns that persistent hostility, despite your efforts, may signal it's time to walk away, either by limiting contact or seeking support from management. This preserves your energy and mental health. Gallo's case study of Ellen illustrates this. Ellen faced a colleague who relentlessly undermined her in meetings, even after she calmly confronted the behavior and built alliances with supportive teammates. The colleague's hostility persisted, draining Ellen's focus and morale. Gallo suggests that Ellen could have walked away by minimizing direct interactions, routing communication through a manager, or escalating the issue to HR with documented evidence. In a similar real-world scenario, Gallo describes a junior employee who failed to disengage early from a mean colleague, leading to burnout. Eventually, the employee requested a team transfer, a form of walking away that allowed them to thrive elsewhere. Gallo's lesson is that recognizing when a colleague's behavior is unchangeable and stepping back strategically protects your professional growth. Disengaging from stressed-out colleagues. Rebecca Knight, in How to Work with Someone Who's Always Stressed Out, advises knowing when to walk away from colleagues whose chronic stress becomes toxic. While empathy and support can help, Knight cautions that absorbing their negativity can harm your own well-being. If your efforts to assist don't yield progress, creating distance is a healthy boundary. Knight shares the example of Jan Bruce, who worked with Abby, a perpetually stressed colleague whose complaints disrupted team morale. Jan initially offered support, praising Abby's strengths and suggesting manageable tasks, but Abby's stress persisted, affecting Jan's own productivity. Recognizing the limits of her influence, Jan chose to walk away by reducing non-essential interactions and focusing on her own work, while still maintaining professional courtesy. This disengagement allowed Jan to preserve her energy without burning bridges. Knight's real-world insight shows that walking away doesn't always mean leaving. It can mean setting boundaries, like limiting exposure to a colleague's stress, to protect your focus and mental clarity. Stepping back from unresolvable conflicts. Holly Weeks, in Taking the Stress Out of Stressful Conversations, implicitly supports knowing when to walk away when conflicts become intractable. Weeks emphasizes managing stressful exchanges, but she acknowledges that some situations, like relentless personal attacks, may require you to disengage to avoid further escalation. Walking away here means pausing the conversation or seeking external help, such as a mediator. Weeks' case study of Karen and Nick highlights this. Karen's aggressive attacks after a failed presentation overwhelmed Nick, who tried to reason but made no progress. Weeks suggests that if Nick's attempts to redirect the conversation failed, he could have walked away by saying, "I think we're too heated to continue now. Let's revisit this later." This temporary disengagement would have de-escalated the situation, giving both time to cool off. In a related example, Weeks describes a manager who faced a colleague's unrelenting hostility during a project dispute. After multiple failed attempts to resolve it, the manager involved a neutral third party, effectively stepping back from direct confrontation. Weeks' insight is that knowing when to walk away, whether by pausing or seeking help, prevents futile arguments and preserves your professionalism. Walking away from a difficult boss. Manfred F. R. Ketz de Vries, in Do You Hate Your Boss?, directly addresses walking away as a last resort when dealing with a toxic boss. He notes that while empathy, feedback, and team support can improve dynamics, some bosses remain unresponsive, making continued efforts unsustainable. In such cases, walking away, either by playing for time or leaving the role, becomes a strategic choice. Ketz de Vries shares the example of Stacy, who struggled with her boss Peter's aloofness and micromanaging. Stacy tried empathetic conversations and adjusted her work to meet Peter's expectations, but his behavior didn't change, eroding her confidence. Recognizing the toll, Stacy chose to walk away by quietly exploring new job opportunities, eventually landing a role with a supportive manager. Ketz de Vries also cites a case where an employee, Tom, faced a boss who took credit for his work. After documenting the issue and raising it with HR to no avail, Tom decided to leave the company, a bold but necessary move to protect his career. Ketz de Vries emphasizes that walking away from a toxic boss, though difficult, can be a powerful act of self-preservation, opening doors to better opportunities. Knowing when efforts are futile. Across the book, experts like Gallo, Knight, and Ketz de Vries stress that knowing when to walk away requires self-awareness and courage. Amy Gallo, in How to Deal with a Passive-Aggressive Colleague, reinforces this with the story of Emily, a new manager who hesitated to disengage from a dismissive team member. Emily's attempts to address the passive-aggressive behavior drained her, and only after her own performance suffered did she request a reassignment, a form of walking away that restored her confidence. This example underscores that persisting in unresolvable situations can harm your well-being, while stepping back, whether through distance, escalation, or departure, frees you to focus on growth. The authors collectively teach that walking away isn't defeat. It's a strategic choice to prioritize your mental health and career. Whether it's limiting contact with a toxic colleague, pausing a heated exchange, or leaving a harmful environment, this decision reflects strength and clarity. Knowing when to walk away is a vital skill in dealing with difficult people, as dealing with difficult people powerfully illustrates. From Gallo's strategies for toxic colleagues to Knight's boundaries with stressed coworkers, Week's approach to unresolvable conflicts, and Ketz de Vries' advice for escaping bad bosses, the book shows that disengaging can be as impactful as engaging. Real-world examples, like Ellen's team transfer or Stacy's job change, demonstrate that walking away, whether by creating distance or starting anew, protects your well-being and opens new paths. The next time you face an unyielding colleague or boss, ask, "Is this worth my energy?" If not, walk away with confidence. It's a step toward a healthier future.